Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, Just Pascal. This was a great overview of how you approach sustainability from your past work on CEO and chair. Some of the questions that came in, we had a ton of questions. As you know, we have over 300 people that signed up for the event. I'm going to start with one that maybe can open the floor, and it's about from compliance to maturity. What are the most effective indicators of maturity when embedding sustainability into a company's strategy, execution, and renewal? How can boards assess progress beyond reporting frameworks?
Okay. I'm not a big fan of the huge reporting which is asked for to every company. Because I see more and more people making a confusion between reporting and action. And reporting is a way to control that your action is going into is progressing and is delivering benefits to your customers, to the stakeholders, to the community at large. Unfortunately, many people make the confusion between reporting on having productive or impactful action. So for me, an index of maturity is when sustainability is exactly not a story of reporting, but it is a story of choosing your priorities, choosing where you can be the most contributive and therefore the most impactful. And when you can see at every level of the company, it can be in R&D, in supply chain, and even in commercial, that people understand what they can bring as opportunities and risk in terms of sustainability to their customers. When you see that sustainability is systematically integrated in the plans, then you've reached that level of maturity. We are with the CSRD, I think today, which is a European regulation, we have to report, I think, as a large company, 1,000 indicators. Our plan for progress, the places where I want to focus, has never been above 10 to 15 priorities. But on those priorities, we've delivered significant progresses. And I think this is when you see the priority. And let's all make sure that sustainability is not associated to reporting, because it will even trigger more backlash to sustainability that we've seen recently. So now let's take the positive of having one reporting, is that at least we speak the same language. I said in my slide presentation that sustainability was the ultimate teamwork place. We were, as Schneider, the first members, one of the first 3 members of the Global Compact of the United Nations in France, and one of the first members of the United Nations at large in the world. I've been 6 years the president of the UNGC in France. I've been 6 years at the global board of the Global Compact. That has been really useful, because when you work with your scope 3, you need a global, a common grammar or common compass, and working together in those organizations give you that. So for people who want to embark on that, you should be part probably of the Global Compact, because that defines a common direction. But it's more so about the action rather than the reporting. The reporting helps you to have that common language. But then after, the ultimate index of maturity is impact on the level of integration in your strategy.
Thank you. And that's very helpful. And thanks for the wisdom on that. Let's move on to the next question. And this is about what you talked about, the stage where you are today. This is a strategy beyond 2025, let's call it. And now that Schneider Electric has met its 2025 goals, what strategic priorities and governance mechanisms are shaping the horizon to 2030? How should boards think about continuity and reinvention at this stage of maturity?
Look, I can't speak about that because the executive team is working on next plan. So we've actually started to debate it with the board. So they've sort of presented what they want to do. We've reviewed it with the stakeholder committee as a first step. That's going to be public at the end of the year when we finish 2025. By the way, just to correct a mistake, we are not yet at the achievement of the 2025 plan. We've not achieved all of our objectives, so we work on that one. But it's going to be another plan, another set of X priorities on which we're going to mobilize the whole company.
Oh, we'll be looking forward to see that, Jean-Pascal.
Yeah.
Well, the next one is about signals of effective sustainability oversight. On the board, you showed us the qualities and the task that the board has. The question is about, from your experience, what are the clear signs that a board is truly exercising effective sustainability oversight? What should directors be listening for or challenging when management presents their progress?
Look, for us, I don't see much of a difference with the financials, right? So it's about maturity. Some signs, practical signs. The time that the board spends on it. Okay, that's one. Number two, the existence of a committee or subgroup of people who is competent in the subject and who is not only there to check that the data reported are compliant, right? A group of people who have a real critical view on the quality of the data, but more so the direction of the progress. So you need experts, right? You have an audit committee with ex-CFOs or CPAs and so on. You need to have, if you want to be serious about it, a group of people for sustainability who have qualification and experience in the subject. And then number three is look at the board and see if you have difficult, controversial, deep debates about the choices to operate. And that, for me, would be the three signs of maturity: that time, qualified people, on deep debates, on controversial debates, on decisions made on the subject.
Thank you. And like I said, it should never be a walk in the park for that CEO presenting to the board. But yet again, it is important to have not just the people that ask the right questions, but understand the answer as well,
Yeah,
and what to do with that.
absolutely.
Super. Well, the next one is about the scope 3 a bit. You talked about scope 1 and scope 2. We understand that scope 3, and specifically the question came on category 15. Category 15 of scope 3 is about the investments that the company does. And the question is about the investment blind spot. You could say that the companies and the boards are increasingly focused on scope 1 and 2 and parts of the scope 3 emissions. But sometimes they may overlook what's embedded in category 15, such as corporate investments, retirement plans. So how can directors identify and address blind spots where financial decisions the company may be doing and intentionally offset sustainability goals? So what questions should the boards be asking to make sure that the company is aligning their capital investments with the purpose that they're trying to do on scope 1 and 3?
My only answer is that on every investment you do, there should be a sustainability component on sustainability review. It can be an acquisition, it can be a new project, it can be embedded carbon, it can be a new product or whatever, but there should be a part linked to sustainability.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Well, the next question is more about the decentralization and global alignment. We know that Schneider Electric has a very empowered structure across global units and across the world. How do you ensure that the board can support or can understand the coherence and sustainability efforts while allowing for regional autonomy? What role should the directors play on one side in learning and understanding, but also being able to guide accordingly when it comes to balancing that consistency with the local relevance? What is your view as a chair?
Number one, that consistency is first and above all the responsibility of the executive team, right? The board is
Right.
not here if you go back to fundamental responsibilities of the board, I would say already make sure that the direction of the company is right. So it's helping the executive to shape the strategy on the direction, and make sure you have the right team of people to steer the company. And if you have the right direction on the right team, then probably you've done 99% of the job. Of course, there are control systems to be put into place. The world is bifurcated, and it's not new, right? I lived during my career in 6 different countries. I still live not in my country of origin. I live in Hong Kong, which is far away from my cultural base, and so on. And the fact is that we have very different cultures and very different ways of approaching things. So you can give sort of broad global directions which are shared across all geographies. You can have some very clear intangible across all the company, like we want to be net zero by this date or net positive by this date. And that's intangible and that's not cultural, that can be measured on that sacred sort of objective. But then the way to approach it will be very different in a country where the electricity is zero carbon, for instance, or a place where electricity is based on coal plants and so on. So you will have different ways to approach that strategy. So what we do at Schneider is that we leave a big space for local adaptation in all of our programs. And we make sure that rather than having a strong central organization in charge, we have strong local teams in charge, coordinated I would say, in an efficient but thin manner from the center. We want to have those competencies really strong in the countries. And what the board is making sure of is that the combination of all those local plans, which are sort of coordinated loosely at the central level, are all consistent. But I would say, back to your question, it's mostly the executive team which is in the front line of that execution and consistency. The board is here to support. Where the board has a crucial role is to be bringing its experience on its view of different companies and bring more to the equation. I say, you've tried that, but have you tried this? Have you tried this? I can connect you to this so that you can go to the next step or explore new avenues. Right. So make sure the control systems are in place and make sure that we push the executive team to try new things based on the cumulative experience of the board.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right on the CEO on that aspect. The board, however, gets to see a window sometimes and they haven't seen the whole novella. They only saw a chapter. So being able to understand well becomes really a lot of work for the board. So glad that you've given that overview. The next question, I know you sort of addressed it already on when it's about short-term and long-term pressures. In times of financial volatility, you could say, how can boards help protecting that long-term sustainability ambitions without losing credibility on financial performance? What mechanisms have helped your board stay the course? You mentioned it before, the role of the board is to look at the long-term strategy. The role of the CEO would be to manage all of these short-term pressures. So how do you manage and how do you get the board to help the company stay in course when they're facing short-term and long-term?
That's a major role of the board. I've been 20 years CEO of Schneider. And of course, when you're in the CEO role, you've got to juggle all the time between making your quarters and putting into place your big plan, your big strategic plan of transformation. In our case at Schneider, it took us 20 years to transform from a product company to a digital company, on an energy company, from a French company to a very global company, to a company which had no anchor in sustainability, to 80% of our business in sustainability. It took 20 years. On many of those transformations, we had no competency at the beginning. So you can't do them in one day. It's going to be a long journey of trying, failing, then succeeding. So as a CEO, and I'm saying as a CEO, you have to make sure you do your quarters to the level you promise them to your investors. This is your license to operate. But it doesn't make your company better. I mean, in a world which is changing so fast, you've got to transform profoundly your company at every moment with a long sight, short sight to make sure you are fit for the future. Managing the company is not enough for an executive team. And the CEO and the executives are in the front line of that, but the board has a key role to protect the team in this endeavor. So making sure that we support them in thinking long-term, making sure that we push them and support them to take risks, because frankly, innovation is about risk. There is no safe innovation. There is no sure innovation. You have to fail many times before you succeed. So the board has to be this place of psychological safety where we share, we protect when choices are becoming tougher for the executive team. The executives can know they can rely on their board to take those risks, provided they manage them responsibly. If they fail, they have to fall back quickly and they have to pivot quickly. What you don't want is a failure, which takes a lot of time to be corrected. But the board has to provide this. I say it, I mean, the board has to be very demanding in good times and have to be very supportive in tough times. And this is a way I experienced it when I was CEO, and this is a way I try to put it together or build it as a chairman of the board.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. And you're right. I think sometimes the CEO has to fly a lot closer to the sun than before. And we need to make sure that it's protected.
Look, for any company on for any human being, it's much easier to focus on short-term operations than to transform a company or than to have big aspiration. And this is where the board has to be both protective of that aspiration, but at the same time, it has also to push further the executive to think bigger and higher, because the rest of the environment will push them to think short-term and to think incremental. And look, the companies we respect around the world, the ones we admire, are not companies which are just managing. They are companies that created impact for their environment, for their customers. And that needs courage. And courage needs courage at the level of the board. So the board is a place in the company that should be the one thinking the furthest away, right? The most transformational, so that they really help the executive to keep that ambition in a world which is pushing all of them to be more conservative.
Very good. Thank you. One last question then, and maybe one that I didn't ask. What advice would you offer to directors that are joining us today that are looking to integrate sustainability more deeply into that full board agenda rather than as a standalone topic or a compliance item?
Look, I would say educate yourself about the subject because it's a complex matter. There is a science behind sustainability. Number two is really try to reconcile all the time economics on sustainability so that it becomes pragmatic. When you think about it, right? Do you prefer today to be when there are major industry transitions from one technology to the next one? Well, we spoke about automotive, right? Well, it's probably more comfortable today to be a leader of the electric mobility than the leader of the fossil mobility, right? So there is a tide which is coming everywhere, or which is hitting everywhere, all of our companies, all of our societies toward more sustainability. Because people would like to achieve more, but while using much less of resources. And if you are on the wrong side of the tide, on the technologies which are less sustainable, it may take 1 year, it may take 5 years, it may take 10 years, but your company will be flooded. You don't swim against the tide. The tide is more powerful than your company. So what I'm saying here is the duty of everybody to realize that there may be a time of relapse of a few years, but at one stage, sustainability will win, as nature will win. So you've got to make sure that with your executives and with your board, you have repositioned the company so that it surfs with the tide and doesn't swim against the tide. I don't know if that answers.
That was fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for the candid insights and the clarity with which you have navigated the questions. I'm going to pass on then to Sonia to help us close with the session. Thank you, Jean-Pascal.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Mary and Catherine, and sincere thanks, Jean-Pascal. What an insightful and inspiring session. We can go on and talk more and ask you more questions, however we know. So hopefully this has been inspiring already to our audience. Thanks as well to our audience for being engaged, dynamic, sending us questions before and during the conversation as well. Thanks to the team who is behind the scene making this happen. And before we close, I would like to share that if our audience would like to watch the recording that we had before on this series that we have developed, actually they can visit our Corporate Governance Center website, and one of the session was about beyond compliance, and the second one was about transparency, and this one with Jean-Pascal, with you, on embedding sustainability into strategy. So also at the INSEAD, we have a sustainability program for those who would like to educate themselves more and understand about business model change and innovation and going into sustainability. Feel free to visit as well the website that we have. And finally, before I leave you, so actually we would like to hear from our audience. We would like to hear about your feedback, your input, any other topics we can bring in next. Please scan the QR code here and give us your insights, because of course we want to address topics that are more of interest to you in the future, and also give us feedback on what can we improve, if any. With this, I thank all our speakers, our partners in this, and again, sincere thanks, Pascal, to you, Jean-Pascal. And well, I think this is the closing, so please, if you can share with us your input on the survey that we have with the QR code. Thank you.
And thank you all. It was good to start the day with you.